This is Viva Fry.
I'm Dr. Peter McCullough.
This is Tom Luongo.
This is Chuck Prodnick.
This is Alex Kreiner.
Hey, this is Brad Wall.
This is JP Sears.
Hi, this is Frank Peretti.
This is Tammy Peterson.
This is Danielle Smith.
This is James Lindsay.
Hey, this is Brett Kissel, and you're listening to the Shaun Newman Podcast.
Welcome to the Shaun Newman Podcast. I had to start this intro again because I was like, oh man, this week is blowing by. Happy Wednesday. And then I got halfway through and I'm like, wait a second, it's Thursday. It's Thursday. Oh man, this week it really is blowing by. Well, let's get started, shall we? The number of ounces of silver needed to buy an ounce of gold at near 30-year highs. Silver is now a bargain price when compared to gold. Now is the perfect time to protect a portion of your hard-earned savings with silver. Silver Gold Bull has a wide variety of best value silver for every budget. Simply text or email Grahame for details. Whether you're a seasoned investor or new to precious metals, Grahame will work with you to answer all your questions and recommend the best products to meet your investing goals. And whether it's details about this or any other questions you may have around buying, selling, storing, or using your retirement accounts to invest in precious metals, just reach out to Grahame, or if you're on silvergoldbull.ca or .com, just reference the Shaun Newman Podcast. When you want to trust on a company to show up and do the job right, look no further than Guardian Plumbing and Heating. These guys have been keeping homes, farms, and businesses running smoothly since 2010. And one of the things that really sets Guardian apart is how they make life easier for their customers. They've got technicians on shift 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. every single day, including weekends, and they don't charge you any extra for evening or weekend service. That means you can get the help you need on your schedule without surprise costs. Just go to guardianplumbing.ca for all your plumbing needs. Ignite Distribution is a high-service supply company based in Wainwright, Alberta, specializing in automotive parts and wide range of additional products, including safety equipment, welding supplies, fasteners, and janitorial items. Operating as a Napa Auto Parts retailer, the company has recently expanded its Wainwright location to a 15,000-square-foot facility, fully stocked to meet customer needs efficiently. And the man you want to give a call there to is Shane Stafford, 780-842-3433. That's Shane Stafford, 780-842-3433. When it comes to precision planting, well, that's been a big jump forward for farmers. It's revolutionized farming with innovative technology to boost efficiency and profitability. And what started as planter optimization now spans the entire crop cycle, offering hardware, software, and upgrades that work seamlessly across brands and models, giving you unmatched control over your operation. Locally, GoTech is evolving to serve you better. You got Scott, your trusted expert, and Jeff on the team now, bringing fresh energy and ideas together. They're committed to delivering the same hands-on support you've come to rely on. Just go to GoTech to find out more about precision planting. I got to change that bloody word. Yeah, it's like weeks later. I still can't get it right. Substack, free to subscribe to. We've got the debriefs going back on. I don't know what's going on my end. Like I'm trying to get the week in review, and I had issues with my computer, and then it's like the world's conspiring against me a little bit. Anyways, we're gonna get at this right. But regardless, Substack, that's where you can subscribe for free, get updates on the podcast. You can become a paid subscriber, get a little bit of behind the scenes. The debrief is one that I've been doing after each interview. You get my thoughts fresh. So, and then the Cornerstone Forum in its entirety is up there as well. The new studio is coming along, folks. It's going to be here in 2025. I thought I had a date, then I thought I had another date. Now I'm just going to say it's going to be in 2025. It's coming soon, but, some things left to do there. If you want to get on the value for value legacy wall, just shoot me a text. There's lots of different ways, and we'll love to figure out a way you could do, skills, labor, materials, money. There's lots of different ways. Just shoot me a text, and you can add your name or your business to the wall. If you're listening or watching on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, Rumble, make sure to subscribe. Make sure to leave a review. If you're on X, hit that retweet button. Hit that follow button. All right, let's get on that tail of the tape. She's a Russian-born U.S. intelligence expert who served as a Russian Doctrine and Strategy specialist in the Defense Intelligence Agency. I'm talking about Rebekah Koffler. So buckle up. Here we go. Well, welcome to the Shaun Newman Podcast. Today I'm joined by Rebekah Koffler. Rebekah, thanks for hopping on this morning.
Of course, it's a pleasure to be here with you and your audience, Shaun.
Well, you left an impression on me the last time we chatted, and I thought, man, we got to get you back on. And then, it's funny when we started talking again. You put a date on it. Okay, yeah. And in the last, I don't know, has it been week? You can walk me through this better than anyone, I think. Um, Russia, Ukraine, like there's been a lot going on. Maybe you can walk us all through it.
Sure. Well, President Trump ran on one of his key campaign promises to end this war, to end the bloodshed. In 24 hours, in fact, he claimed that he was going to do that on the first day that he goes to the White House for his second term. That right at that very moment when he announced that just indicated to me that he doesn't really have any advisors in his circle who understand anything about this war. This war is super, super complex, and it's not resolvable, not in 24 hours, not in 24 months even. And I started as usual. As a former intelligence officer, I do still intelligence analysis based on a very rigorous tradecraft. I don't just go on TV, and run off my mouth, as a lot of people do, actually, because they're politics commentators. I provide my actual analytic line. I predicted this war in my book, and both in the intelligence community. I briefed NATO on it. And so I started saying, no, this plan, this peace plan and ceasefire are unachievable. And all of a sudden, people started, shutting me down. So then, but Putin, of course, did get, basically, he started getting engaged with Trump, because Putin does want to end the war, but he wants to end it on his terms. Okay. But to the American side, it seemed, oh, piece of cake. We're going to go do that. Then Zelensky was making some, as the Russian saying goes, vibrating the air. He started putting out, some tweets that were running counter to President Trump's ambition. And then President Trump dressed him down in the Oval Office, telling Zelensky, you have no cards, shut up. And Zelensky indeed does not have the cards, because he can't really conduct the war without our support. We are the one, we meaning the United States, the Europeans. You may weigh in what you guys are doing
Well,
on
we
your
keep
side.
sending money. I don't know if our military can really send much other than a couple of old Jeeps, and I mean, we have our own problems up here with our military, but certainly money. We've been sending money
Yes.
off to Ukraine.
So basically, the West was propping up Ukraine to the point where we, and when I say we, just to, again, I'm talking about collective West led by the United States, to the point where their government would collapse if we didn't give them any money, let alone weaponry, right? Because we're paying their government salaries, their health insurance, you name it, even though maybe we don't pay to our own, we don't give free healthcare to Americans, but by golly, we give it to Ukraine. So President Trump said to Zelensky, basically, shut up. And then President Trump started sending his envoy, Steve Witkoff, to Russia. And that poor guy made, several trips. And Putin is only happy to receive him, with open arms and everything, because Putin indeed wants to end this conflict. But again, he wants to make sure that Ukraine remains in Russia's strategic security perimeter. What does it mean? It's like we have the Monroe Doctrine over here, right? And you guys in Canada are kind of part of it, right? Because we provide air defense for you, the northern North American Combatant Commands, the Space Forces, NORAD, North American Airspace Defense Command, that I briefed actually personally on Russian warfighting strategy and Putin's thinking last summer. So we are providing that coverage, that defense coverage for you. So basically, Putin does not want, just imagine, like, flip it to this side. If Russia or China stationed warfighting capabilities in Canada or in Mexico, would we ensure and remove those capabilities? Hell yeah, I hope so. So that's what Putin wants to do. But in addition, he wants to transform the entire relationship between Russia and the United States and reverse everything that Biden has done, right? Reverse the permission to strike that we gave to Ukraine using our weaponry to strike deep into Russia. Reverse, like, the whole sanction situation. So that is going to take time. Things just don't happen that quickly. You can't just, like, do a ceasefire, right? And but in addition to that, Putin is not stupid. The ceasefire is really what the West wants to do, pushed by the Europeans. Yes, President Trump wants to end this war, but the Europeans, what they want to do, they just want to rearm Ukraine and give time for them to get on a wartime footing, to upgrade their weapons arsenal, and to ensure that Ukraine remains as their strategic security perimeter, right? So therefore, after all of these multiple rounds, sending Steve Witkoff, meeting in Saudi Arabia, in Istanbul, here, there, and nothing happening in terms of results. And remember, Trump wants things like that, right? It's a completely cultural mismatch. The Russians, things just don't happen in Russia that fast. There's a saying, "Тише едешь, дальше будешь," which means the slower you go, the farther you get. Americans culturally are like, boom, boom, boom. If it doesn't happen, President Trump got pissed off. And so yesterday there was this whole barrage of tweets, or however you call it, truth posts. And Trump basically said, Putin is playing with fire. He's crazy. He called himself Putin crazy. And but the thing that worried me about it, Shaun, go ahead, jump in.
Well, I was just going to say, this is one of the tweets. I've always had a very good relationship with Vladimir Putin of Russia, but something has happened to him. He's gone absolutely crazy.
So obviously, I mean, it depends on what Trump meant by crazy. If he meant clinically insane, Putin is not. There's no evidence that Putin, and we've done back in the intelligence community, as you know, we do psychological profiles. There's a whole center in the CIA that does leadership profiles. We did that of Saddam Hussein. We have, like, medical doctors. Obviously, nobody has ever examined personally. No Western doctor did a psychological evaluation of Putin in person, but we've done it remotely. And I personally, for my own business, now I worked with a medical doctor, a psychologist, Dr. Chani. You can look it up on my I have on my YouTube channel. I see I have an episode with Dr. Chani evaluating, and he's a CIA contractor. There's no evidence. Putin is just he's a rational actor. The reason President Trump, I believe it is my assessment, called Putin crazy is because he's not properly briefed. The night before, Trump sent out this rant on truth. The Russians launched 366 drones all across Ukraine, and that made Trump mad. What the U.S. media and Western media in general did not cover properly is that Ukrainians made an assassination attempt on Putin on May 20th, when Putin was visiting Kursk, which Ukrainians actually conducted an incursion on into the Russian territory, Putin's helicopter came under drone fire. Now imagine if Trump's helicopter came under drone fire by the Russians. This is an act of war. Putin was measured in his approach, right? But Trump apparently wasn't briefed that this was a retaliatory strike. And now the one thing to point out, Shaun, to your listeners, is that everybody is screaming how civilians are getting killed, were getting killed in these drone strikes. Well, the Russians, out of 366 strikes, it was a single campaign, drone warfare campaign, 12 civilians were killed. Now, let's look at the numbers here. In terms of the rate, this is a point, let me get, I've done my analysis here. The rate, right? This is a 0.033 civilians killed per strike, okay? 0.033. Now let's look at the ratio of civilians being killed by U.S. military in strikes in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Somalia, and Yemen from 2002 to 2020, right? Between 10,000 and 17,000 were killed. That is the rate. Wait for it. The rate is 0.7 to 1.4 civilians killed per strike, okay? So compare 0.033 to up for 1.4. So let's just do our homework. The problem with the media landscape in the U.S. is like it's brings me back to the Soviet Union. And as some of you know, I was born and raised in the USSR. I was lied all my life, and therefore I just hate lies. And that's what we lived with. There was like an alternative reality. And now the same alternative reality is created in US and Western media space, where only one side is covered in their account. And I'm not like a Putin supporter or anything. I wrote a book, for goodness sake, exposing, the war plan. But let's just be realistic about it, because when we're not realistic, what ends up happening is that we make wrong assumptions, and we are letting someone like a foreign actor like Zelensky, who's extremely talented at deceiving the world, right? We're letting him drag us literally into World War III, and there will be no winners in that war. So, and that is the consequences of like not telling people the truth and living an alternative reality that was created in the US media and in the Western media.
I think it goes without saying that killing civilians, anyone being killed, is heartbreaking, and everybody wants to stop. But what you're pointing out is like when you do the math and you just put it side by side, strategic strikes, I guess, would be the word, because obviously he's not killing innocent bystanders every which way. It's not this giant bloodshed that we make it out to be. Certainly there were civilians die, but when you put it side by side with others, it's extremely low compared to counterparts.
Exactly. And again, it's heartbreaking, right? I'm not justifying by any means by what's going on, but we have to look at the root causes of this war, right? And the root cause of this war is that before President Trump, 3 US presidents, George Bush, and beginning even with Clinton, but George Bush primarily, Barack Obama and Biden, were hell-bent on pushing Ukraine into NATO, okay? Well, what are you gonna expect, right? If somebody were trying to violate our Monroe Doctrine and placing, like I said, warfighting capabilities into that space, we would remove them. And right now, speaking about warfighting capability, and I think that's really not properly covered. It's kind of was a little bit covered by the New York Times, but then everybody forgot about it. There are 12 CIA bases right now in Ukraine, okay? With there's a NATO combat training center called in Yavoriv. Yavoriv is about 10 kilometers bordering with Poland. Our military officers, our intelligence officers, and again, I'm saying collective, our U.S. And NATO, they are on rotational basis training Ukrainians how to fight, Shaun, how to kill the Russians. Okay, now are you surprised that Putin would want to remove that capability? Moreover, on rotational basis, there's National Guard from New York, from Florida, from Tennessee, constantly on rotational basis in Ukraine. Nobody talks about that. Moreover, talking about the assassination attempt, right, on May 20th, that Ukrainians conducted on Putin. Ukrainians don't have their own satellites. They don't have their own precision, strike capability. They can't do the targeting packages. This is all NATO support, NATO warfighting support. All
So
Ukrainians do
if
is
you're
just press the button.
so if you're sitting in Putin's shoes, you
Yes.
know that the Ukrainians press a button, but the only reason they get to press a button is because they're having immense amount of help from the guy saying, "Hey, let's have a ceasefire."
100%. So Putin is not an idiot. Why would he do that ceasefire? And moreover, Putin does not trust us because we have demonstrated to him that just on a dime, we can change the decision. Remember, in the very beginning of this war, former President Biden was very adamant that there will be no U.S. boots on the ground, that what else did he say? We're not going to go to war with Russia. And he was threatening nuclear Armageddon. He was telling his donors that Putin is serious about that. And we will never give Ukrainians the long range missiles, right? And then all of a sudden he gave them ATACMS. And then all of a sudden, but he put the rules, right? The rules of engagement were that Ukrainians were not to strike deep inside Russia. They were only allowed to defend their own territory. Then all of a sudden he changed like that. What is Putin to make of it? Trump did the same thing. When he came in, he was very strong in terms of putting Zelensky in his place. He withdrew military support. He withdrew intelligence sharing, right? And without intelligence sharing, Ukrainians can't do squat. And then all of a sudden, he put that back in. I mean, why would Putin believe us? I mean, people somehow think that Putin is an idiot, or like they think that he is a fool, because on the one hand, the same people who call Putin a murderer and a dictator and a war criminal, they huff and puff that Putin does not make concessions. Well, if you think Putin is not a nice person, why would he just make concessions and just end the war, in which he's trying to remove this existential threat, just because you say so, just because Trumps want to, and he's winning the war. And that's another thing that is not covered, is the same people who got us into Afghanistan, and we spent, again, collective, we spent 20 years there. And for the U.S., it's $2.2 trillion, okay? And 6,000 lives, men and women in uniform. And then we withdrew. And what does it say? We couldn't even beat an adversary that lacks a regular armed force. Those are the people with towels on their heads running around like lunatics with AK-47. And so it's the same people are now saying, oh, give more weaponry to Ukraine. Victory is just around the corner. Well, wait a minute. Afghanistan and Russia are two different things. Russia has the world's largest, and I repeat, the world's largest and the world's most sophisticated nuclear arsenal, and holds advantage in that particular sphere, even over the United States. So whatever happened on September 11th, is going to seem like fireworks if Putin, who's been really calibrating his strategies, fighting like below the threshold of what we call in the intelligence business of a direct kinetic response from the West. That's why it's taking such a long time, which all the so-called experts say that, oh, Russia can't even beat Ukraine. Well, Putin can demolish Ukraine tomorrow. He just wants to avoid the war with NATO. So the same people are dragging us into the nuclear war right now that got us in Afghanistan.
Okay, I got a whole bunch of questions, but I'm going to try and
fire.
I just want to start with two. At one point, Russia wanted in NATO, and NATO said no. Correct?
Correct.
So if I'm Martin Armstrong, when he was in Calgary, he said, one of the lessons he learned from his father was you don't judge someone with the way you think, you judge them by the way they think. And I ever since I heard that, it makes complete sense to me. I sit here and I'm listening to this and I'm like, okay, so you're sitting there and you're Russia. Okay. This isn't Shaun being pro-Russia. This is just looking at this from their where they sit in the world. It's like, well, we tried
just being common sense, right?
Yeah.
Common sense.
We tried joining NATO. They told us no. They told us they wouldn't turn, a bunch of countries into NATO countries. Oh, wait, they're doing that. You mentioned they got 12 CIA bases in Ukraine, among other things. The entire Western world is funding it. They want a ceasefire, but they don't want to draw back. They don't want to pull any of that stuff out, is my understanding, if I'm getting this right.
Correct. Not only that, Shaun, sorry to interrupt. We are adding long-range missile capabilities, and as German Chancellor Merz just said, that it still needs to be verified whether he meant to say it or not, but to the Russians, they're going to take it at face value, right? And what Merz said is that all the limitations on Ukraine to use all of those long-range missiles from Great Britain, from Germany, from the United States have been removed. So Putin is sitting there and saying, they can attack Moscow, tomorrow. So go ahead with your train of thought. You said that.
Well,
so basically, from Putin's standpoint, not only we're not removing that stuff, we are adding.
Yeah. So you go, well, you said this can't be, Trump walks in, I'm going to end it in day one, right? I'm going to have a season. And to me, that's just the way Trump is. If you watch Trump, he says things and it's just his intention. My intention is to end the war. If it takes 2 years, it takes 2 years, but we're going to end this war. You, if I heard you correctly, you said it won't end in a day, a month, maybe not even 24 months. And I go, okay. So if you could sit and have the president's ear and be like, okay, Donald, this is going to take time because there is a lot going on here. I don't know if you need to give me a time frame, but what are the things that would need to be done to make Putin go, okay, they're serious about ending this war? Is it just removing the U.S. from the Ukraine? Is that even possible? I don't know. In my world, I go, okay, so pull it back. When you have all these long range missiles and nuclear capabilities, why do they have to be on the doorstep? That doesn't make any sense to me, other than I'm sure there's a whole bunch of things I'm missing. But is that even possible? Can Donald call up his military and go, okay, we're going to pull back? Or is there just so many interests at play here that I don't understand?
Exactly. So, and the reason I'm saying it's unresolvable is because it's not just Putin, it's the United States that really does not want to do it, because Donald is not the only one who makes it. Yes, like by constitution, he's the one that makes the decision, but he's here just for another 4 years. And the deep state, and I'm not afraid to use this word because I have firsthand experience with with the deep state, and you know what, you know how I was targeted by it, since you have read my book. The deep state, they have turned this whole thing into the Ukraine NATO situation, into a money laundering scheme and into a gravy train, right? Because the reason why we, the US, want Ukraine as part of NATO is because it's a then we would need to arm Ukraine and outfit it with NATO standards weaponry, right? And that is a boon for our military-industrial complex. Look at the stocks of Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Martin, and it goes more. Look at how much money all of these congressmen make. Like somebody recently, you probably can get it on, on Google, put up a graphic like of salaries of Nancy Pelosi and all of these, congressmen, and annual salaries, which is approximately like 250K. And then their actual declared income is millions of dollars. And Elon Musk raised that point, and he actually started with Doge. He started putting things together, like trying to figure out how do they get their money. And that's why, like, Elon Musk is no longer there, because he's a threat. He's a threat to all these people. So not only that, Shaun, so these are the two pieces, right? I just named military industrial, who are feeding off. They effectively, Shaun, they're feeding off of dead Ukrainians by giving more money to Russia. They perpetuate the conflict and enrich themselves. So military industrial complex, Congress people, all sorts of lobbyists, okay, who Ukraine hired, and I'll give you some very specific names, and it's actually people who are vibrating U.S. airwaves. All of these contributors, go to legacy media and check who has been talking. And there's a certain 4-star general, I'm not going to name who, but y'all know him, on a major network, on a major U.S. network, keep saying 4-star, okay? Keep saying, give Ukraine more weapons. The victory is just around the corner. I'm kind of simplifying, but that's basically it. Fox News contributor. Another one, former CIA person, keeps saying the same thing. Victory is just around the corner. Now look at how these people make their money. Look up their names. One is the head of the think tank that is funded by the military-industrial complex. So that person is making income on that.
Yeah, that's a huge
And
conflict of interest.
the other person, look it up also, is on the board of a company called BGR. And I can send you links that you can embed.
I would appreciate that.
Yes, I will. BGR is profiting. There's even an article by a Western publication, profiting from arming Ukraine. And when I challenged the one of the networks on this by saying that those people's analysis, because they cherry picked my analysis and make it sound like I was agreeing with these people, and I said, no, I don't agree with these people. I'm not just a commentator. I'm an intelligence analyst, and my clients, I make my living by accurately predicting Putin's behavior, and I have a very strong track record on it. So my integrity is very important to me because that's how I make I need to be accurate. I don't just like run off, my mouth. And I said, I disagree with these two people. You made this sound like my analytic line the same. It's not. You cherry picked my analysis. And moreover, these peoples, and I named just for, and it applies to a lot of them. And I'm just alluding to this particular two. I said, their analysis is not unbiased. They're incentivized to give more weapons to Ukraine so that more Ukrainians get killed, so that they get more money because they are paid by the military-industrial complex. It's this simple, and you can look at this, and it's mind-boggling to me that people but the American people have no idea. They think that this is a legitimate four-star general. He knows. But it's the same freaking general who told us in Afghanistan, we're going to win in Afghanistan. So it's really, it's not on, it's immoral. And typically, like in intelligence, we don't talk about morals. Like if we don't call somebody the war criminal, whatever, because there are a lot of bad guys, right? We just assess a threat, how it is. War is war. We assume that people are going to be killed, including civilians. The Russians, for example, they never lecture anybody. You kill civil, blah, blah, blah. But it's the U.S. It's all these, the do-gooders, right? The Lindsey Grahams and the, what's the other one? It'll come to me. Putin is a killer, but you're the one who keeps lecturing the rest of the world on morality and how moral you are. But you essentially killing Ukrainians in order to enrich yourself. And then the second one is in order to protect the Europeans, because the Europeans are screaming that, if we let Ukraine fall into Putin's hands, we're going to be next, right? He's going to strike Poland. Well, that is such a dumb argument, because Putin is not suicidal. He's a rational person. He doesn't want to attack NATO unless it's in self-defense, even preemptive self-defense. But because attacking Poland or even one of the Baltics would invoke collective defense clause, Article 5, and then he's in a direct war. He very specifically wants to avoid the direct war because he'll have to go nuclear. He doesn't want to have nuclear. All of the war plan, and so the Europeans, they just deceiving everybody because they want Ukrainians to do the fighting to keep themselves,
Rebekah,
so-called protected. Yes, go for it.
I'm curious to have someone who analyzes the data walk me through something that is on my mind. How old is Putin?
He is, oh my goodness, I want to say he is 70 at this point. His birthday is October 7, so he's about 70. Why? Tell me now. 72.
72. Okay. No, I'm
Yes.
So, okay. You said so I'm just looking at it from the standpoint of Putin, or the world looks at the U.S. and sees Donald Trump there, and he's in, and he's going to make big changes, but they know it's less than 4 years and he's done.
Exactly.
It's just done. And then when I look at the other side, I go, okay, so Putin's 72. Like how many years does he have left as president of Russia? Is it 20? Is it 10? At what point can he no longer be the leader, the master in chief of?
If you are talking about like constitutionally or like health wise, so Putin legitimately can be president until 2036, right? Because yes, so
till he's 83, if I'm doing my math correct.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, Putin is the kind of person who wants to make sure that Russia is secure. Like they think like he's a manga, whatever. yes, I guess one can make that point, whatever. But we, like I said, like in my profession, we don't do place those. What he wants to do is he wants to ensure the security of Russia, and so he likely is looking for his replacement right now, just as a hedge, because look, there are assassination attempts on him, right? Um, but he's not just going to trust anybody. This person does not easily trust. And so my assessment is that just like Yeltsin handpicked Putin, Putin is going to handpick somebody. And right now, there's just nobody in his circle who is ready to be that person, who is of a younger, much younger age. So in terms of health, since we started talking about it, he already outlived the average age of a Russian male, but he's extremely healthy because he exercise. He's an avid, athlete, in great shape. He doesn't do drugs, and he doesn't drink much. He's a very moderate drinker, maybe like a glass of wine once in a while. So, and that he can live for a while. And I'll give you also like a personal example. People think that like Russians die like flies, and yeah, because there's alcoholism, there's this, that. But if you have good genes, and Putin has good genes, his father and grandfather lived into old age. So my own father is now 89, never drank, never smoked in his life, right? He also, all his friends are like dead. So it's conceivable to me that Putin can be president, beyond 2036 if they don't kill him and if he doesn't find a replacement. So, but what was your question? Like the actual question?
Well, I don't know if I'm walk you through a train of thought. I look at it and I'm trying my best to, I used to look at time, and I say this lots, in a very like day to day, week to week, month to month. And, the longer I do the podcast, I just start to look in longer time frames. And yes. I'm starting to understand different cultures and the way they look at time. And so when I look at this, I understand, like, to me, how the U.S. operates, it's starting to make more sense. You bring up the deep state. Well, they're just going to bide their time until Trump's out. Then they're going to try and win the next election. They're going to try and do whatever they can to win the next election, whoever the successor is of Donald Trump. Yep. I don't think anyone can argue at this point that Donald Trump is like one of the most popular presidents of all time. It is wild to me. It goes beyond the U.S. border. It goes to other countries. He's just larger than politics. And when I look at it, I go, okay, so the deep state is looking at Donald Trump and going, well, we got a little less than 4 years and he's out. And, so you go, he's got to try and end a war, like could be cataclysmic war with Russia.
Correct.
Because of all the cards that are on the table. And time is already rapidly closing on. I'm not one to say 3.5 years, a lot can't happen. But certainly, when you look at a time frame of how long Putin's been in power, it is a short little time frame. And he's rushing because he wants to end it. That's what it looks like to me. But now he's got the deep state that's working against him because they want to prolong this for all the reasons you just said. And when I look at Putin, I go, on the flip side, I've watched Putin, and I want to be very clear here. I don't know Putin. I don't think he's the greatest thing since sliced bread. I just look at him and I go, he's very calculated. I mean, they've attacked him how many times, and he hasn't pulled the trigger to go full out wild. So, like, I look at that and I go, here is a guy who is very calculated, meaning he's willing to take some losses. He's willing to take an assassination attempt and not, like, destroy Ukraine and march into Poland and just keep marching, So, like, to me, forgive me,
although
folks.
although he could, right? And
right. Well, but that's restraint. He's showing
That
restraint.
is restraint, and they're painting him as like this, like he's trying to annihilate the world and that he's crazy. He's been extremely, extremely restrained in his approach because he wants to avoid a war with NATO. All he wants is to restore that strategic security perimeter, which, by the way, I may have mentioned in our last episode that with the collapse of the Soviet Union, the strategic security perimeter, which is the shortest distance between NATO and Russia, has reduced from 1,000 miles to 100 miles. That is shorter than from New York to Washington. Okay, so he needs, from the terms of the missile flight length and trajectory and the reaction time, he needs to have time to make the decision. So what happened now, Shaun, with what these people did by giving Ukraine both the long-range missiles and the permission to strike deep inside Russia, they actually signed Ukraine's death sentence. Why is that? It's because originally Putin would have been satisfied by keeping the eastern part, the Donbass area, the Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, Kherson. That's where all the key industries is. It's kind of like the area that's the breadbasket of Europe. So he would be fine with that. Now that Ukraine has that capability, the Russian intelligence has assessed that they need the entire Ukraine as a strategic buffer zone. Now they are going for the entire thing because they want to keep that distance, to give themselves, to protect the heartland, Moscow, St. Petersburg's, and the key cities from missile strikes. And Putin needs reaction time. So that is exactly what these Lindsey Grahams and whoever else is behind those. I have no idea who's pushing Trump into that, but clearly that circle is very, very strong because Trump is falling into that trap that he's misinformed. He didn't know about the assassination attempt. He doesn't understand. So that's what they did.
How could he possibly not know there was an assassination attempt? How's like
Well,
that's one of the biggest world leaders on the planet. How
I
is
know,
that
because they
possible that another
likely
world leader doesn't know that?
They probably kept it from him. I mean, if you don't put it in the briefing book, right, in the PDB or whatever, and the networks are not covering it. I mean, Trump watches U.S. media all the time, like he has Fox on the time, he has Newsmax. None of these people covered it. Have you seen it? Have you guys covered it in Canada?
No. Does Canada cover anything? No. I was listening to the radio today, and we got Pride Parade coming back in Edmonton. That's what I heard this morning. I'm like, great. That's what's really the top of mind right now. They're all celebrating. It was fantastic. I was so well informed this morning. No, that's why you coming on at this time. I'm like, man, what a just an probably opportune time. Like it's at a time where, I felt like things were moving the right direction. It felt like, I watched Zelensky in the Oval Office and be like, this is wild. Like Trump is tearing this guy apart. And, and then he'd had his calls with Putin. And I'm like, is it 8 months away? Is it a year away? It just felt like it was moving in the right direction. And then it's gone completely off the rails. Or at least that's what it looks like to me. And you're not going, no, you're wrong, Shaun. No, it's completely on the rails. This is just a slight bump, a stiff wind.
Oh, no. It's that. In fact, like you said in the beginning with your opening, and we are really on the brink of nuclear war. And let me explain how and why. People, so I assume your listeners saw Trump's tweets or postings saying Putin is playing with fire. The bad things are going to happen to Russia, really bad things. Okay, so you mentioned a couple minutes ago how, and I forgot whom you quoted, that you have to other
Martin
people think different.
Martin Armstrong.
Martin Armstrong. Okay. That concept that you mentioned is called in the intelligence business mirror imaging. It's when you project your own thought processes, your own mental framework on your adversary. And then you making decisions based on that. Well, that is wrong, right? So let me tell, because that's going to get you in trouble, because all of your policies are going to be wrong, your assessments are going to be wrong, because Putin does not think. That's what I constantly tell people when they talk about sanctions, this, that. I say, Putin doesn't, you're assuming Putin thinks like an American. He doesn't think like an American. He's Russian. He's damn Russian. So the danger, and I put out on my X handle that, if I may please give a plug to my X
Please do.
Rebekah, which is spelled a little differently, Rebekah 0132, and 0132 is the code for an intel officer in the U.S. GS system. I put it out. I really was concerned, Shaun, after Trump put out the barrage of postings on social media, because Putin will read it in a way that is consistent with the Russian mindset, with his mindset, with Russian cultural predisposition for worst case scenario. Putin is looking not just at Trump's tweet that he said bad things are going to happen to Russia. He's putting that tweet in the following concept. Okay, we just lifted restrictions from Ukraine to use long-range missiles to strike deep into Russia. There was just an assassination attempt. Lindsey Graham just called Putin's game is going to be over. We're going to do something really bad. Game over. The NATO just conducted military exercises, military drills in Estonia with participation from Estonians, the Swedish, and the Finnish, who are the new members of NATO. And Finland shares an 800-mile border with Russia, right? 3,000 British troops just returned from the exercises, specifically when they were training Ukrainians on NATO military hardware. Okay, we are flying fighter jets along in the Baltic Sea, Black Sea, right? He's putting that tweet in that context, okay? And the two very important points to understand to this, there are things that we do not see, right, at the classified level that the Russians are monitoring. And one example is satellite maneuvering, because every time like there's an impending attack, you have to maneuver satellites to do the proper coverage, to do the targeting. If for some reason, right, something happened, like let's say we maneuver it for a different reason, to move it into like a different, or like whatever, right? Because we don't even think from our side. I really doubt that Trump meant really something bad. He was just like frustrated, like said really bad. But let's say it coins all of these things that I just mentioned, right? And something completely unintentional, because we're not even thinking of going to war with Russia, right? I'm just saying, for example, and something like that, the probability of unintended escalation and the Russians interpreting it as a precursor to war, they have a preemptive doctrine. Here's how this is important, and this is, so I put it on my tweet, I said, POTUS, needs to be very conscientious about his language, because Putin is placing it into this context that I explained, and President Trump may not have intended to say. But here's what it sounds to the Russians, because the Russians' history is very different. Their history is full of wars. They assume a worst case scenario. They lost 20 plus million people in World War II. I mean, they had Napoleon invasion. They had, the history is just completely full of wars. So it means to them something different. And the way that the Russians make their threat assessment, I also put it on my Twitter just as public service, because unfortunately right now the U.S. intelligence community doesn't have Russia expertise. Like I said, I personally briefed Space Forces NORAD and NORTHCOM last. I was stunned with the lack of expertise. It was even less than when I left. So I put it out. Here's how the Russians make their threat assessment. There's a software-based program, right, where all of these, what I just named to you, the context, they're called in the intelligence business INW, indications and warnings. They're all placed together in the database, in addition to what the leader says, what the Congress, anytime Lindsey Graham says Putin is a murderer, he can no longer, or Biden said, remember, he can no longer remain in power. All of that is put in there against the context of how Washington conducted business for the past quarter of a century: Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Syria, regime change. Okay. The system then spits out it's algorithm driven, spits out the probability of risk of an impending attack, and it provides courses of action. It's a decision support software. And then a human goes there, somebody very close to Putin goes in to see what's happening, and then Putin makes a decision, how to act. As I said, is a preemptive doctrine. My official analytic line, if the Russian intelligence and Putin himself have made a conclusion, an assessment that an attack on Russia is imminent and so it's inevitable and it's imminent. There are two different things. There are two different courses of action. It would trigger a preemptive strike, including on the United States, including on NATO. It is very easy, and wargaming has shown back in the intelligence community that unintentional war is a very real thing due to miscalculation, because we have done all of these things and then we said something stupid that we didn't mean to, but the Russians interpreted it. That's the reason. And if there's a kinetic war, and I'm not saying, I just want to be very precise here for your listeners, the Russians will not do a nuclear strike right off the bat, right? There's a whole escalation ladder, but wargaming has shown it eventually and fairly soon go into nuclear. It will start with like crippling cyber attacks, like an EMP strike, space warfare, turning our satellites down. So just to plunge the economy, but then obviously we would retaliate. So eventually it'll go nuclear.
Well, this is so. If I may, this brings me back to why I asked Putin's age, because when I just draw it out on my piece of paper, nobody can see that, but I go, okay, let's just go. He's got 11 years. I realize he could go for 20, but I just go 2036. Okay, so 11 years.
Yeah.
Trump's got 3. You just rattled off how they have basically analysis coming in showing how close they are to an imminent strike. And if I look at it, you don't say imminent strike in the next day. You don't say imminent strike in the next 6 months. You say imminent strike. Well, imminent strike is like in the next 3 years. If
I'm sorry, Shaun, just to correct you. That's not what imminent. That's what inevitable is what you mean to say, right? Inevitable does not mean like right away, but it mean and the Russian intelligence has already concluded that a direct, and this is what I wrote in my book, a Russia-U.S. war is inevitable. That's a quote. That's a quote. So, and that's why I wrote that book. And that's so people are playing with fire really right now. So go
Can
ahead.
you say that line one more time? A Russia-U.S. war is inevitable?
Inevitable. Inevitable. Doesn't mean tomorrow. It's not
Yes.
imminent. And
So,
what they're looking is we are escalate. And as an analyst, I am confirming to you, we are on that escalation ladder and we are climbing it very steadily for the past 3 years. Because remember how we started, like we didn't give lethal aid to Ukraine. It was blankets and night vision goggles and MREs. But then Trump actually is the one who get. So from the Russia, they are watching all of this. Okay, they are watching how it started and where we are right now. And we have already pretty high. We're still not nowhere near nuclear or even like crippling cyber. We're not there. But the progress that has been made, it indicates to the Russians. So what that does is the Russians are saying to themselves right now, they announce, and I'm saying to myself, kind of on the one hand, I'm proud of myself predicting that. And I mean, it's a terrible thing if it actually happened. I wish I were wrong, but I'm thinking to myself,
but
we're there. This is exactly, and the Russians say we were correct. We were correct invading Ukraine because eventually it's going to happen because look, it's happening.
You know, when you take the time though, right? Like you sit and you contemplate time for a bit and you stop looking at month to month and you start looking at the trend and where the trend is going.
Mm-hmm.
I go, once again, I come back to this thought. Whether Putin has more than 11 years or not, I just go 11 years and he knows in his next 11 years, there will be another U.S. election where there is the possibility that somebody gets elected that isn't like Donald Trump. And under Donald Trump, who would be the most outspoken that I can recall, and maybe you have somebody you can toss in there, on war and trying to stop it. If he can't stop it and it's still slowly escalating, then I'm glad you changed my words, and because I appreciate the precision in what you're saying. It's like, well, it becomes inevitable because if Donald Trump can't slow it down, then the next president certainly isn't going to be able to slow it down, which means you get to the inevitability of where we're heading, which is a really like sobering thought, because I look at it and I go, why can't? I mean, this has been the history of the world. It's like it's like you're fighting the current or something. You know, it's like why can't we just lay down arms, draw back? I understand there's been bloodshed and everything. I get that, but when you look at the history, there's bloodshed everywhere. Like eventually, World War I comes to an end. Eventually, World War II comes to an end. Now, all the things that happen after the wars then predicate what comes next. And so I look at this and I go, you're talking about like the worst of possible outcomes ever. Right? I don't think there's anything worse than an EMP blast over, well, any population. Just think of where that takes you.
Yeah.
The only thing maybe worse is a nuclear blast that just destroys populations as a whole. And you go, when you say it's inevitable, not for nuclear, just for confrontation, for a kinetic war to happen.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's a sobering thought. And I just look at the times. Putin's looking at his next 11 years. He's not looking at the next year or the next 2. And certainly when he got in office, he wasn't looking at, I got, the next 3. It's like, they're, and that's how when I look at the Russians, they just look at the world differently in us. So it's two opposing views trying to solve a problem, because I assume it's trying to solve. Some are trying, some are very bad actors. That is the deep state, and others, I might add, that are trying to perpetuate this. But that's how the inevitability comes about, is it not?
Oh, absolutely. You just laid it out perfectly. I wish there were more people like critical thinkers like yourself, and honestly, there aren't many in the. I was stunned with the lack of like strategically minded, like critical thinking people in the U.S. government, and yeah, that's why we are in this, terrible situation. I'd like to mention one more thing. You just triggered a thought in me by, doing this expose, very enlightening that you just did. AI, artificial intelligence, right? It's may very well precipitate the whole thing because we are hell bent on incorporating AI into like fire control systems in with the drone warfare into our weapon systems, right? And AI has this ability to like hallucinate when it goes wild, and it's not like doing it goes beyond what it's supposed to do. So imagine something like that happening during this very tense period. It's like all of a sudden you lost control of your finger on the trigger, so to speak, and it's happening beyond your will. And that is a real with the pace that AI is developing right now. And the Russians are not very fast on AI, and this is why, like, the Russians are very, yes, they want to develop it, but and they are developing it, but they inherently are very suspect of technology. They like human intervention at the very like last point. So what happens, and what's happening like in the nuclear, for example, and in other realms, our systems, Western systems, US, are a lot more vulnerable than the Russian systems because they want to make sure that they prioritize security over convenience. So it's extremely like, if people think that somehow we can disable Russian nuclear command and control, good luck with that. It's impenetrable. It's impenetrable, and it has a thing called the dead hand. I don't know if you remember that from my book. Is where like they make sure, like, even if like there's a devastating strike that is being detected and incoming, um, on Russia, that's going to decapitate the leadership. Basically, you take out the key people that hold the nuclear football. Then the system goes automatic to do a retaliatory strike. And with AI on our side, it's very easy to get there. I'll send you another. I'll give you another link to the article describing the whole system. The dead hand. That's why it's called the dead hand. It's the actual name. It's perimeter nuclear command and control. But the nickname is dead hand. And if I may, just you triggered another thought in me when you spoke about the time and everything. Going back in time in 1983, and not many people know that it used to be highly classified, and in a few years it is declassified. So if you, and it's in my book also, in 1983, the USSR and the US and NATO came very, very close to nuclear war because the Russians interpreted that there was a military exercise going on close to Russia's borders, and it was against the background of President Reagan's like very kind of militant rhetoric against Russia, and the Russians interpreted it as a precursor to a nuclear strike. And they actually literally put the leadership in the bunkers. And thank goodness US intelligence did not pick it up at that point, because if we picked it up, we would have interpreted it that Russia is preparing to do a nuclear strike on us, and they're just putting their leadership in the bunker to secure them. And we would have struck. It's like, it's a maddening thing. And so on this point, I want to read to you, I also put it on Twitter, a little quote that really demonstrate how you end up. Neither side really obviously want, neither the Russians nor the U.S. nor NATO, hopefully, want to have a nuclear war, but they can end up there. And here's the quote from the epilogue in my book that conveys that psychology. And it's a quote by somebody named Thomas C. Schelling, and he's the thought leader behind the wargaming theory. And the quote comes from his book, The Strategy of Conflict. So here's how we get into war. Hopefully not, but if we were, here's how it happens. Listen very closely. He, thinking that I was about to kill him in self-defense, was about to kill me in self-defense. So I had to kill him in self-defense. Make sense?
It does.
Want me to read it again? You got it?
You're giving me a sober episode of that we haven't had for a few. Where can people find your book, Rebekah? I'll put it in. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I'll put it in the show notes. That way, if people, when you saw me scanning, I'm like, I have notes in it because I was highlighting and I was just going through, and then I'm like, I must have left it on my bedside table. Yeah. Because I had notes, and I'm like, oh, so you're rattling all this off, and I'm like, there's just little things that you write in there that I think are really interesting, I guess, and they're not. Some of it are you talk about these I don't know, maybe I'm oversimplifying, but like big thoughts. But there's like little thoughts just in how you write and analyze where I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I should ask about that. And then of course I left the book sitting at home, obviously, because I can't find it in the studio, which is just silly of me. Oh well. But if people wanted to pick it up, I'll put the link in the show notes. I appreciate you hopping on and doing this. And let's not wait so long to have you back on again, because as things continue to evolve here over the coming months and years, I think you're a sobering voice in the conversation.
Thank you very much for having me. And you are one of these very unique shows where people actually get the truth and true information, because you can't get it anywhere. Since you asked, the book is, I'll show your people very quickly, Putin's Playbook, and it's really anywhere. Amazon is the easiest way to get it, but I know some people don't like Amazon, so in any bookstore, pretty much Barnes & Nobles or wherever they carry it. Yes, I'd be happy to come again, and we will. You can ask me all these other questions that you marked in the book.
Sounds good. Thank you, Rebekah, again.
Thank you very much. And please, people follow me on X, Rebekah 0132. Take